Like it's 10:15. We'll get started. So this session is called Managing from the Cloud with System Center Advisor. My name is Paul Mestemaker. I'm a senior program manager on the System Center Advisor team. This started as an incubation project a few years back. I was on the SQL Server team, and we've seen it go from being a SQL Server incubation project to covering many different server workloads, and we'll go into some of the details about that. What I'd like to cover today is give you a high-level overview of the benefits for Advisor for those of you who haven't heard of it, and give a refresher to those of you who have heard of it, probably from last year's MMS or some of the things that you've seen on the web, and describe what's new. I'd also like to break down our high-level architecture about how the data moves in between servers and how that data leaves your server environment and goes into our hosted cloud service in Azure. And then we've also had many customers deploy Advisor, and we've seen some repeated issues. So I'd like to give you guys a heads up on things that you can do to avoid those issues when you're deploying Advisor. If you do decide to leave the session early, there are two things I'd like to have you take away. One is that System Center Advisor is available through software assurance. So if you have software assurance on your Windows server, on your SQL server, on any of your other server workloads, you get Advisor for no additional charge. And if you don't have software assurance, then you can sign up for a 60 to 90-day free trial. It only takes 5 minutes to set up at systemcenteradvisor.com. And System Center Advisor works with Windows Server and server workloads like SQL Server, Exchange Server, and SharePoint Server. So before we begin, are there any other questions or comments before we get started? Because this is what I have prepared for you guys. Awesome. Let's get started. So the pitch for Advisor is that we would love to enable you guys to better support your servers and prevent problems through the wisdom of the cloud. You guys are all experts in the server infrastructure that you have today, whether that's Windows Server, SQL Server, Exchange, SharePoint Server. But sometimes you have to call customer support. And that whole round trip looks a little something like this. You call up customer support, you say you have an issue with your server, and then they ask you a couple questions. One is they ask you for the symptoms of what seems to be the problem. And the second thing is they've asked you what's recently changed on your server that may have led to those symptoms. So what they ask you to do is they ask you to run some ad hoc manifest to collect data from your environment. You then need to upload that to customer support. Customer support has some tools behind the scenes that analyze that data and help them figure out what's wrong as quickly as possible to get you back up and running, and they provide some type of best practice recommendation or a hot fix or something that can alter the state of your server. Now, we at Microsoft have tens of thousands of customers that call us for support every year, and we see that a lot of customers have the same underlying root cause, and after we see it a number of times, it just becomes essentially like a maintenance task for us where we know pretty quickly what that root cause is, but it still is a lot of pain and a lot of effort for all of you to call up customer support for something that you could have prevented in the first place. So that's what we would like to do with System Center Advisor. We'd like to take the wisdom of all the customer configurations out there, collect data in a proactive way from each of your different server environments, and provide you very targeted recommendations on what you can do to your server to prevent problems that have happened in customers' environments that are very similar to yours. The three high-level pillars that we have here is that we want to help you proactively avoid problems by giving you alerts for your servers that represent whether there are patches that are missing, whether it's misconfigured or unsupported configurations. And we do this through regular assessment of your server configuration. We capture your server config, and we send it up to the cloud and provide recommendations. We'd like to resolve issues faster. So if you do have an issue and you do need to call customer support, we'll be able to have a configuration change history about each of the servers in your environment. You can share that with your support staff or with Microsoft support. And we'd also like to help you reduce downtime by helping you prevent problems in your server environment that other customers have already experienced. And this is all available as a software assurance benefit. Now, to give you a more concrete look at what this can do for you, I'd like to just go into a quick demo and show you what Advisor looks like once it's already set up. So here I am on a Windows 7 PC. I'm just going to go to Internet Explorer and open up systemcenteradvisor.com. I'm going to sign in with my live ID. And I'll be presented with a list of companies, a list of organizations, a list of departments that I, as a person am affiliated with. So I'm just going to go to Contoso. The next thing that I see is a graphical overview of my server environment. So here you can see that there are servers with critical alerts, servers with warning alerts. You can see the breakdown of the alerts through each of the different workloads that I have in these servers. So I see there are a lot of warning alerts by SQL Server. So I'm just going to click on here, and it's going to drill through from the overview to the alerts pane. And because I clicked on warning alerts affiliated with SQL Server, it's automatically going to filter this view for me. Now, the nice thing about the way that we built this is all this data is now cached in your web browsers. This is a very rich web experience. So if you want to do any type of sorting or any additional types of filtering, all this happens instantaneously. Now, with each one of these alerts, we provide a very brief description on what is the issue. So we show you as quickly as we possibly can how the issue was detected, why it's important, and what you can do to resolve the issue. So if we take a look at an issue like the SPN, notice how that was instant search. Basically on key down, it filtered that for me. For any of you that have a SQL server in your environment, you may have run into something called an SPN issue. And this is a service principal name. Now, I personally am not too familiar with what an SPN is, but with this alert, System Center Advisor shows me exactly what I need to know. First, it gives me a description of what the problem is, and there are two actions that I can take on this now. Either one, I can go to the solution that is provided by Microsoft Customer Support. So Microsoft Customer Support has created each one of these alerts to give you a proactive look on what could potentially be wrong with your server, and has provided exactly one link that gives you a direct access to the underlying solution. So there's no more searching on Bing or Google for any type of error code and searching through many different forum posts and figuring out what could actually apply to your environment. We now have exactly the solution that you're looking for. So if we look at the underlying resolutions, it says Case 1, how to resolve a missing SPN, Case 2, how to resolve a misplaced SPN, and Case 3, how to resolve a duplicate SPN. Now here in Advisor, we also capture information from your environment so we know exactly what the underlying problem is. You can see that there's a missing SPN right here, so we would follow the missing SPN recommendation, which is Case 1. So to actually solve this, you would run this on your server, set SPN-A with the SPN and the account, and both of these are provided for you in Advisor. So you can just right-click on here, you can copy it to clipboard, you can build your command line, and not have to open up any other console or any other diagnostic package. So this is the ideal for every single alert that we have in Advisor. It's very contextual to your environment. It's a top issue that we've seen in Microsoft Customer Support, and we give you actionable feedback on how you can resolve the issue without having to open up any additional console or diagnostic package. Does this sound pretty good? All right, so it gets even better. Now, with Advisor, we don't want you to run this once a month. We don't want you to run this in an ad hoc basis. We want to proactively be running this in the background every single day and sending this data up to the cloud. And the reason why that's extra beneficial for you guys is that by capturing this configuration, we get a baseline. And we know that day over day there are certain changes that happen in your environment. So for example, if we want to look at what has changed related to this alert, we can right-click on the alert and go to View Configuration, which then changes us from the Alerts tab to the Configuration Change History. And one of the settings that we captured about this was the account. So by right-clicking on the alert, it filtered down to that specific server, and then I can type in account, which is the property name that was affiliated with the alert, and you can see that there was actually a change between the account on SQL Server to be a network service account to a domain account, and that domain account is actually what had the underlying SPN issue. So this way, we now also give you additional context by capturing this information over time about roughly when that change had happened and what the values were before and after that change. So this really helps customer support when they ask you the two things like, what are the symptoms? You guys understand the symptoms. And now when they ask you what's changed, you'll be able to say, instead of nothing's changed, oh, let's take a look at Advisor, and we can see exactly what Advisor has captured. All right. So now let's, okay, so you guys familiar with Advisor now? Are there any other questions about the overview that we have? All right, seems to make sense. Great. Let's go back to the PowerPoint deck. There's a couple more demos that we'll do in a little bit. What I'd like to do now is drill into the architecture of how Advisor works. So I had gone to, in the demo, systemcenteradvisor.com, which means that this is a publicly available website with data that's hosted inside Microsoft servers that are outside of your environment. So the way that we make this happen is that there are two things that you need to deploy in your environment. One is an agent and one is a gateway. The agent is what collects data periodically throughout the day for each of your servers. And that data is then sent roughly every 12 hours to what's called the gateway. And the gateway is what actually pipes that information from your environment to Microsoft's hosted cloud service. The gateway also downloads new and additional rules. So every month, as we see new trends and new cases pop up in Microsoft customer support, we will then try to put that knowledge and those the systematically detectable problems into Advisor, and it automatically pulls down the information from our cloud to the gateway. And the next time the agent talks to the gateway, says, hey, I'm on version 1 of the rules, and the gateway says, hey, I have version 2, and the agent automatically pulls that down. So once you deploy this, there's no additional change that you need to personally do to your environment. This is a cycle that automatically happens on your behalf. So once the data is in the cloud, you can either look at that yourself through our web portal at systemcenteradvisor.com or share that with customer support should you have any issues in your environment and you want to enable them to see your data to get an idea of what's changed. Are there any questions on the overall architecture on how the data is captured, moves around your environment, or gets sent to the cloud? Yeah, question in the back. Yeah, so the question is what type of data is captured and what is sent to the cloud? We have a slide on that in a little bit, so we'll cover that in depth. Yes?
Can you do this offline? So can you have the agents run offline, collect data, dump it to a file, and later on FTP it up manually?
So the question is can you do this offline, and can you send this through like FTP manually? So the way that this works is very similar to what you want. I don't know if it meets your exact requirements, but when you look, for example, if you have servers that don't have internet connectivity, you can just deploy an agent to those servers. So each one of those servers can then be routed through a gateway, and that will then be sent up to the cloud. You can have different buffering intervals where this data is serialized to disk on each one of these agents, and it's also buffered here on the gateway. You can choose exactly what time of day, or if you want to have the upload happen manually, you can choose to do that as well. And I'll demo that in a little bit. We don't offer FTP as a way of uploading it to us. This all happens over SSL on port 443. Okay, yeah, question in the back.
Where would the gateway server sit in your infrastructure?
So the question is where does the gateway server sit? So the gateway server is the only server that needs to have internet connectivity, so it can sit anywhere that the agents can talk to the gateway. So if you have a private network, you may need to open up ports to talk to this gateway. But once the gateway has internet connectivity, it will just take all the files, and I'll go through a detailed look in this when we go through the 5-minute deployment. But basically, all of these files are captured, and then they're zipped up or into a cab. They're cabbed up, rather, and then those cabs are then periodically uploaded to the cloud. So the gateway, the amount of traffic that we have from the gateway to the cloud is about 150 kilobytes per server per day. So it's very, very small. It requires very little CPU and almost no memory. So it's just a very simple service. So the question is do we have plans to tie in the agent with the OpsMan agent? Yes, we've already done that. It's actually the Operations Manager agent under the covers. You don't need to have Operations Manager in order to use it. We'll deploy it. We'll deploy the agent if Ops Manager agent's not already there, and we'll go through that in a little bit as well. All right. So the type of knowledge that we have here, as I mentioned, are the top issues that we've seen in Microsoft customer support. The high-level categories are we look at patches that are not available or that have not been deployed to your servers. Now, we don't want to reinvent Microsoft Update here. Microsoft Update does a great job of showing you all the patches that can apply to your servers. But what we've noticed through a lot of the calls to customer support is that many times customers lag between a patch being available and it actually being deployed to their server. And so some of the issues that we see are things that should have been automatically resolved if you were keeping up with the latest patches. So if we see a number of cases come in with customers not deploying a very specific patch, and that becomes a top issue in customer support, we will then put that in Advisor. So in addition to it being in Microsoft Update and WSUS and all that, we'll also show it in Advisor and give a bit more additional context as to why it's very important that you deploy that in your environment. The other types of rules that we have are whether you have a misconfiguration. So there's just a lot of settings, whether it's a registry key in SQL Server, we have like sys.configuration settings. SharePoint has a bunch of configuration settings that we capture, and we just make it very clear the recommended value that it's at, as well as the current value that we've captured from your environment. We also roll up very highly important event log errors. So if there's an error in your disk I/O subsystem, or if there has been some type of memory paging that has gone on in your server, even though that's not something that we can know that you're in a bad state, we know that something bad had occurred. So we'll roll that up and also put that into Advisor. Another interesting set of cases that we've seen in customer support is when a customer calls up and they don't even have like the first service pack for Windows Server 2008 or SQL Server 2008. And that actually puts you into an officially unsupported configuration. So when you call up Microsoft support and they do call you back, they'll say, we can do best effort at this point, but there's no guarantee that we can actually support you in this configuration because you're so far back from your patch level and you're missing all these service packs. So what we do in Advisor is we let you know that you have an out of support configuration so that should you need to call Microsoft support, you will actually not be able to get the best that we can give you. It's in an unsupported configuration. Now, Advisor, since it uploads data roughly once a day, we're not a real-time monitoring solution. So you still need to have something like Operations Manager if you want to get real-time notifications of your systems being unavailable or underperforming or causing any type of line of business downtime or immediate business impact. We are very much proactive about showing you problems that customers similar to you have already experienced in their environment. And as I've shown you with the configuration change history, we're able to capture config changes over time. There's also a config snapshot, which shows you the 1,000 or so properties that we have captured about your environment, so you can know within the past day roughly what those settings look like. The types of data that we capture are the things like your server name, the OS version, IP address. For things like SQL Server or SharePoint Server, we'll capture basic properties about that. So if you're SQL Server admins, like the sys.configuration, sys.databases, server property EX. Now, the type of data that we capture is very much configuration related. It's not an all-inclusive configuration manifest. You can imagine that if we capture every single setting about every single product, all the reg keys, all the file versions, that would be a lot of data. What we capture are the top settings that customer support has needed over the last 5 or 10 years to get an idea of what could potentially be wrong in your environment. And we also map that with IT professionals and MVPs that we've talked to make sure that we're capturing the high important settings that will be very useful for you guys in identifying and diagnosing problems in your environment. Okay, so we had launched System Center Advisor as Microsoft codename Atlanta about a year ago. Last year at MMS, we announced the brand of System Center Advisor. And this year, we'd like to announce our commercial availability. So we are now no longer in beta or release candidate. We are fully available, and we are a benefit of software assurance. This means that customers like you guys need to have a software assurance license for whatever workload you'd like to monitor. So whether that's Windows Server, you should have software assurance for Windows Server. If you have SQL Server, you should have software assurance for SQL Server. As we add additional workloads, we'll also attach to software assurance for those workloads. For any of you that don't have software assurance, you can sign up for a 60-day free trial, At the end of the 60 days, we currently have a 30-day grace period where we send you an email about once a week saying, hey, you're still on a free trial, you need to upgrade to software assurance. But the nice thing is that we have talked to a lot of IT professionals, and we know that a lot of IT pros think they have software assurance, or they know they have software assurance, but they don't know who in their organization controls the software assurance benefits. So we've made this an incredibly easy process for you guys, where you check a radio button that says, yes, I have software assurance, and then you check a checkbox saying, for real, I have software assurance. There's no agreement number that you have to type in. There's no additional person in your organization. We do date stamp and figure out who has put on software assurance, but we want to make this incredibly easy for you guys. And if we do see rampant abuse of this system where a lot of people are saying they have software assurance when they don't, we may eventually put in some type of thing where you need an agreement number, but that's the least of our concerns right now. We want to provide you guys with a very simple, great experience. Service provider licensing, can you give me an example? I'm not familiar with that. Ah, SPLA. Okay, so you're saying you are a third-party service provider. There are clients that pay you, and you want to get licenses from Microsoft on behalf of those clients and then charge them some margin on top of that, right? So we currently do not have a SPLA program for System Center Advisor. We are only attached to software assurance at this point. Now, if your end customer already has software assurance, then what they can do is they can provision you access to their account. So that way you can still provide, you can still get insight into their servers and provide a higher service level by having this configuration change history and all the alerts, and you'll be able to see that and then use that to provide a better service to your customers. But yes, we've heard about SPLA, and I would personally love to make this happen. We've had some talks for a while. Hopefully, at some point, we can get that in there for you. Okay, any questions on the licensing? All right. Just out of curiosity, how many of you know you have software assurance? All right, so about 60% of the audience. Great. All right. Next announcement, global availability. So when we first launched this, we were a US-only beta and release candidate. Now we are globally available in 26 markets as of April 2012. So if anyone's listening to this on demand later on, these markets could change. The current list, you can go to microsoft.com/online. Yeah, the link's right there. So with the 26 markets, what we've done is we've had our legal and compliance teams at Microsoft identify which markets we know can send data to Advisor. The reason why this is interesting is that Advisor being an online service, we have our data centers based in the United States. So there may be some markets out there or some industries where data cannot leave their environment and be stored in the United States. Our legal and compliance team has already checked off that these 26 markets are completely within all the legal and compliance regulations that are out there. Are there any questions about the markets that we support? Are there any requests for markets that you don't see up there? All right, seems to be pretty good. Okay, so we are also now supporting additional workloads. When we launched, we had SQL Server. Last year at MMS, we announced that we had Windows Server focusing mainly on the Active Directory and Hyper-V. And now we have added Exchange Server and SharePoint Server. So we have all these workloads available to you guys, and it has the simplest deployment possible for all of these servers. We'll demo that in a little bit. Are there any questions about the workloads that we have? So the question was, are there any plans to include workloads that are more client-based? Do you have an example? Like, do you want us to support like Windows 7, for example? Yeah, okay, so question is like, will Advisor ever support something like client OSs like Windows 7 or problems with Office? No, Advisor is specifically meant for server workloads. There is a similar looking tool with a similar deployment mechanism called Windows Intune, and that's what is meant for the online client manageability. Yes? What's that? So the question is how about link server? We are in talk with the link server folks. We don't have anything to announce at this point. Yes? Yeah, so the question is what's on the roadmap? There's no roadmap that we can disclose for future workloads at this point. We want to identify the workloads that have the most amount of customers and the most amount of support issues. And these are the top workloads that we've seen so far from a supportability point of view. So we think this will have the maximum customer impact. Link server would be another interesting one that we have. And we also want to keep trying to maintain newer versions of the existing workloads. So as, for example, we now support SQL Server 2012, which just launched in the past week. And we're able to now, ideally, when the workloads launch, their actual general availability will also have advisor support for those. So the question is there any thought to making Advisor a fully on-premise product where the data does not get sent to Microsoft? Was that the question? The business model that we have around this is that this data becomes very useful to Microsoft so that we can identify the common patterns across all customers and do a much better job of targeting the potential problems that each customer sees. So it's unlikely that we will have a version of this that we can just include in software assurance for no additional charge without sending that data to Microsoft. So at this time, we're not seeing the ability to get this on-premise. Though there was an MVP that had figured out how to get management packs out of Advisor and put it into Operations Manager. We don't officially condone that, but we thought it was a really cool blog post. So you guys can find that out there if you try. Okay, so we have shown you Advisor. We've talked about the high-level architecture. We've talked about the licensing and what's supported. Now what I'd like to do is I would like to show you how you can set up Advisor in your environment. And this whole demo, end-to-end, will take about 5 minutes. So this is an incredibly simple product to deploy. And I hope you guys will realize how little effort it takes to get this going. So I am remote desktoping into a server in Redmond. So this might be a little slow. I'm just going to pop open systemcenteradvisor.com. And previously, I had chose sign in, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to choose create account. I'm going to put in my live ID again. And before, it showed me all the accounts that I had previously had associated with my live ID. Now it's telling me, I already have accounts. Are you sure you want to create another one? And I'm going to choose yes. Here, I'm going to call this MMS 2012 demo. You can put anything you want in here. We don't do any validation on the company name, so however you want to organize your servers, feel free to do so. Now I'm going to be presented with a question of whether I have the free trial, whether I want to activate the free trial or if I want to use software assurance. If I want to do software assurance, I just check these two boxes and click next. But since I don't have software assurance, I'm just going to click 60-day free trial. I'm going to accept the services agreement, and it's going to let me know I have 60 days, and that is my deadline to either claim I have software assurance or close my account. Now up pops the onboarding wizard. So this basically describes everything that I've described to you today, what an agent is, what a gateway is, how the topology needs to be laid out. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to download the setup. And the setup contains the agent and the gateway for both 32-bit and 64-bit versions. The agent that we use under the covers is the 2007 R2 Health Service from Operations Manager. And I'm also going to download a certificate. This certificate is dynamically generated for the account I just created. So this certificate now will be affiliated with the gateway. So the gateway, when it's on your on-premise servers, will say, hey, here's the certificate for MMS Demo 2012. So all the data that I'm sending up should be affiliated with that customer. You don't need to import that into the certificate store. We do everything that's necessary in the setup that I'm about to show you. So I'm just going to double-click Advisor Setup, choose Run. I'll click Next. I'll accept this license agreement, choose where to put it. Now I can choose between installing an agent or a gateway. If I already had a gateway set up, I could just install an agent, but I need to install a gateway, and it says, hey, gateways and agents by default communicate over port 80, so we're going to open up this for you. If you don't want to have the agents and gateway communicate over port 80, there are advanced steps that you can take to do a different port, and this is only internally in your environment. The setup has now detected that the System Center agent is already deployed on this server, so it's going to temporarily shut it down while it is multi-homing it and adding in an additional management group under the covers. So this is basically saying if you don't have an agent on the box, we'll deploy the agent, and then we will set up Advisor on it. If you do have an agent on the box, we will automatically multi-home it. So that way it continues to work with Operations Manager on-premise as well as Advisor. Okay, so now the bits have been deployed, the services have been registered and activated. Now we need to configure them. So now I just choose the registration certificate I just downloaded, and I can put in a proxy server so that my server can connect to the internet. I choose Next, and then I choose Commit. So then each step along the way, it's going to tell me what it's doing and whether or not it's successful. We've had some deployment issues that we'll go in a little bit, so we wanted to make this as clear as possible of where the installation could have failed. There's been a number of interesting things around clock skew and other top problems. Looks like this one worked. We've also, in the last few months, enabled Microsoft Update. So should we have any changes to the underlying agent or the gateway, this is automatically handled through Microsoft Update and WSUS, so you'll have a good notification of any binary changes. If there's only new rules and new configuration points that we capture, those are automatically handled by Advisor, so you don't even need to use Microsoft Update or WSUS for that. It just happens for you automatically. Okay, so we have deployed Advisor, that's it. And now you're ready to go. So if we look into the servers pane on Advisor, you can now see that there's a new agent and there's a new gateway that have reported in the last hour. We've also heard feedback from our customers that it's been difficult to understand whether the agents or gateways are still sending data to Microsoft, so we've created a few new things. First off, the last update, we've put this, instead of having a timestamp, we've done an age here, and we also have a reporting status. So if, for example, the agent or gateway doesn't send data to Microsoft for 3 or 5 days, we'll change this status so it makes it very clear whether or not there's an issue in your environment. And when you click on each one of these, we also have this new details pane down here, which shows contextual information about the agent. So if there are problems with the agent, there'll be a new link over here that gets you a direct link to troubleshooting agent issues. But since there aren't problems, here are the 3 things that you can actually do for this specific agent. Okay, so we've deployed this. Now, a lot of customers expect that because it's deployed, that they should be seeing alerts instantaneously. Now, the way that Operations Manager agent works is it has to go through the whole discovery process where it detects what's on the system, then it detects the properties of that system, and then it has to take that data and send it off to our management group, which is really just the gateway. So what we have here is we have this yellow bar that says a new agent was detected but is not yet reported back to Advisor. See the servers page for details. Please wait up to 24 hours for the initial data to appear. Now, I am a somewhat impatient person, so even though this automatically sends data by default between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. of the local server time, I don't want to wait 24 hours. So what we have done is we have documented some advanced commands that are called the run now or the upload now commands. So I will go into a bit more detail and show you how that works now. You don't need to do this. It's a bit more advanced. You can just wait and have this happen automatically. But I'll show you exactly how this works. So I'm going to go into my program files directory, and then I'm going to go to System Center Advisor. And there are 2 important folders here because I've installed both the agent and the gateway. There's the agent data, which has a folder called Advisor Monitor, and in there we have two important folders. One is the configuration folder, and this is where we have the model.xml file. So the model.xml file, this is all the configuration settings that we've currently captured about your system. So if anyone's worried about the type of data that we capture or they're curious about what we're actually capturing from their environment, feel free to inspect this XML file. We also have another folder called the cache. So this is where we have additional pieces of discovery data of what's changing, and we have these alert update data. So each one of these is essentially an alert that we have captured about your environment, and we're sending that, we'll eventually send that up to the cloud. So if we look at the configuration, we now see that we have about 1 megabyte of data that's captured in the model.xml. And I know that in my environment, 1 meg is about the right size of the model. So what I can do is I can very easily use this advanced command to force the agent to send data to the gateway. So I'm just going to go to the System Center Advisor, and I believe what I have to do is create a new file called agentupload.cfg. And what's going to happen is the agent listens for this file, and when you actually put it in that directory, it finds the file, and then it kicks off a command to package up all that stuff. So you notice how the cache directory is now empty. We only have the model.xml here. That means that all that information was cabbed up and sent off to the gateway. So if we go now to the gateway data folder, you can look at the mailboxes, and there's basically a mailbox for each of the agents that's sending data through that gateway. So here's the agent that we just installed, and we have one package in the from agent folder. Now, if I want to send the data from that's currently queued up on the gateway, I can now run a different command to upload that data to the cloud. And this one actually uses PowerShell. So what you do here is you just say add PS snapin, you type in Microsoft Advisor snapin. Now that that's loaded, you then use the command send SC Advisor gateway data. And once I hit that, notice over here that this cab will disappear and then be put into the uploaded folder. So we, by default, keep an audit trail of everything that we've ever uploaded from your environment in this uploaded folder. And we keep that for 5 days by default, and that's completely configurable. So if you want to keep it for longer, you can change the registry key. If you want to save the, I don't even know how large this is, the 139 kilobytes of disk space per cab that we capture, then you can set that registry key to 0, and once we upload it, we'll just delete it. But by default, we have it there for 5 days. Okay, so now that it's in the cloud, there's nothing left to do on your environment. We just need to wait for the Advisor backend to process it. So we'll see how busy Advisor is. And it looks like it's still processing in the background. But once that processes, we will see some alerts show up. So that could be anywhere from a few seconds, or if there are a lot of servers sending data right now, it could be a few minutes. So we'll check back in on this if you guys would like, and you'll start seeing alerts from the environment. All right, so are there any questions about this? Yes?
So, two questions. First is there any kind of redundancy in the gateways, or if one of the gateways goes down, do the agents automatically find another one?
So the question is there any redundancy in the gateway? For example, if a gateway becomes unavailable, will the agents automatically find a different gateway? We don't currently have that feature in there. If there is a communication problem between the agent and the gateway, what you're able to do is you're able to point the agent at a different gateway manually and then upload all the cabs that hadn't been previously uploaded.
And then the second question is, you mentioned it's built on top of the SCOM 2007 R2 health service. Is it going to be compatible with the SCOM 2012?
Yes, you're stealing my thunder, but yes. The question was, is there any compatibility between System Center 2012's agent? Yes, there is. So if you don't have an agent, we deploy the 07 R2 agent. We did that because it's just a little bit smaller in size, and we wanted to make the download as small as possible. But if you do have System Center 2012 Operations Manager agent already installed, we will automatically multi-home it and not deploy the 07 R2 agent. So it just works seamlessly. So the question is can you use anything other than a Windows Live account? Right now, we only support Live ID. We don't support ADFS.
Will you go over the like a large-scale deployment scenario with deploying agents that already have SCOM 12 agents installed?
Go over a large-scale deployment scenario?
Yeah. So, for example, how do you push an agent to 5,000 servers?
Oh, okay. So the question is, man, I really love Advisor. I want to push this out to 5,000 servers. Great. We made this completely scriptable. So if you have config manager or if you just want to use ps exec, you can just provide a command line and we'll automatically install and configure the agent in a single string, agent and gateway. Was there a question over here? Nope. Yes?
So could you just explain the relationship between the operations manager agent and the advisor agent?
Yep, I have a slide on that. I'll get in that in a minute. All right. Looks like the cab is still in queue for processing, so we'll go back to the PowerPoint, and we'll go over some of the high-level questions that had just come up. Okay, so as you've seen, it only takes 5 minutes to set up your environment, but it can take up to a day and elapsed time to see the alerts. There are upload now commands that are available, which I had demoed to you guys, but they're fully documented online as well, so you don't have to memorize what I had performed. We have seen some top deployment issues based on the customers that have tried out Advisor. One of the top issues that we have is because we are trying to securely send data from your environment to the cloud, there needs to be a contract between the two, and we use that with our certificate. But if we see that your gateway server is more than 5 minutes off of internet time, we will actively refuse connections from that gateway server because we can't trust it. And we are actually kind of surprised by the amount of clock skew that happens out there. Whether your server's time is off by 6 minutes or 18 minutes or a year, it doesn't matter. We are going to refuse connections from your gateway server. So, strongly recommend that your server's clocks are synced with internet time. They don't necessarily need to be synced with each other. A lot of people have a very consistently off data center where every server is off by 18 minutes. So they can function together, but we need it to be synced with internet time so that it's within 5 minutes of the time that we have in Azure. So there are KB articles that can show you how to do it. What I do if I talk with a customer is I just open up Bing and I type in what time is it, and then we just look at between the server time and the time that Bing tells us, and we can pretty easily diagnose that. All right, next top issue. A lot of customers, when they deploy Advisor on their servers, they actually use their server and Internet Explorer to download our setup package and our registration certificate. Well, our registration certificate is considered an encrypted page. So by default, with the higher security settings in Internet Explorer on Windows Server, you can't download the registration certificate. So our recommendation is that you download the certificate and the setup from a client PC like Windows 7, put that on a folder share, and then execute it from your server from that folder share. Now, if you do want to use it on your server, you can either lower the security settings on Internet Explorer or specifically uncheck the option, which is do not save encrypted pages to disk, and you'll be able to download the registration certificate. Or should you choose, you can also use other browsers that do not have this symptom. Yeah, this guy was like, no. Yes, I'll help you out somehow and someday. All right. Agent cannot talk to a remote gateway in a work group. Recommendation is to have a gateway on each non-domain joined server. So in a domain joined environment, it's really easy for the agent and gateway to talk to each other because we use machine accounts that are trusted because they're in the same domain. In a workgroup environment, machines do not inherently trust each other, so we can't do a secure server-to-server communication. So I'm going to just draw this out. So our topology recommendations are for domain-joined servers. You put an agent on each server you want to manage, and then you have one gateway for a group of servers. In a non-domain joined server environment, you need to have one agent and one gateway on each individual servers. Otherwise, the agent that you deploy on each one of the workgroup servers won't be able to send data to a central gateway. So to draw this out, in a domain environment, you have one agent and one gateway on a single box, and then for each additional box, you just deploy agents, and you point that to that centralized gateway. Now, in a workgroup environment, you start off the same way, where you have an agent and a gateway that sends data to the cloud. But each additional server, because they can't communicate within your environment, also needs to have an agent and gateway. And there's no additional overhead for us. We have no problem scaling. But this does have some ramifications in your environment. This now means that each server that you have in a workgroup environment will need to have internet connectivity because you can't have them communicate centrally in your environment and have that single aggregation point. Now, we have had some larger customers that have large data centers that don't have domains, and we do want to improve this in the future, but unfortunately, this is the best recommendation that we can provide right now, and hopefully this will alleviate some headaches because you now understand the current limitation that we have in workgroup environments. All right, are there any questions on the top issues that we've seen in deploying Advisor? Great. Okay, so let's go into the last demo that I have here, which is customizing and collaborating with Advisor. So as you can see here, our cab has been processed after a few minutes, so now we have alerts in our environment. So that was just 5 minutes of effort plus some advanced commands and another few minutes of waiting. This also means that we have a configuration snapshot, so all these configuration settings about the environment. You can see that there's SQL on this box. But you'll notice that we don't have any configuration change history because we've only uploaded one cab to Advisor, therefore nothing's changed. But as you upload cabs, we will then detect what changes over time. So let's say now that we have this environment set up, we want to invite colleagues to use this environment, or we want to invite a service provider, or we want to invite some consultant or third-party person like a technical account manager at Microsoft. Well, that's really easy. You just go into the account pane, and then you choose to manage users. And here you just choose Add User, and you just put in their live ID. So if you want to put in an additional person, you can then choose between making them a user or an administrator. An administrator has the ability to add additional people to the account as well as close the account, whereas a user does not have those options. And then once you send it off, an email will be sent to the person giving them instructions on how they can join your account. Also, should you want to upgrade from a trial account to a software assurance account, you just hit the upgrade button. You see the same dialog right here. And then you check that box and you click next, and you then have an unlimited version of Advisor. But since I don't have software assurance, I'm not going to do that. Now, in Advisor, we've taken the same underlying management pack and agent technology that's in Operations Manager, but we have a different set of assumptions. We have assumptions saying that we want to have Microsoft manage the knowledge. We want to take the top issues that we see in customer support and really minimize the amount of customization that you guys need to do to see value in this. So I want to show you some of the ways that you can tune this, you can customize it, and you can provide feedback to us to let us know if we're doing a good or bad job. So first thing that you'll see here is that on each alert, there are little happy faces and sad faces. So if you like an alert and it's useful to you, click the happy face. If you don't, you hit the sad face, and you can provide verbatim feedback on why that alert is useful or not. I think we originally used thumbs up and thumbs down, but I guess that's a geopolitical issue in some country somewhere. So we have happy faces and sad faces. Fun times building software at Microsoft. Also, if you don't like an alert, for example, if you have a test server that you're managing with Advisor, and there's a series of alerts that just don't make sense. For example, on SQL Server, I don't care about backing up all these databases because this is on a test server. What you can do is you can right-click and you can choose Ignore, and then you can choose to ignore either this specific instance of this alert, all alerts like this on this server, or all alerts like this entirely. Now, we don't really want you to check this bottom box because it's going to ignore this alert across all of your servers in your environment, but it's good feedback for us when you do ignore it. But for me, in my scenario, because it's the test server, I want to ignore all the alerts in this server, so I just click OK. And now you can see all of those have disappeared from the view. Now, let's say that you accidentally ignored something that you wish you hadn't ignored. You can go to the Manage Alert Rules dialog, and you can see everything that you've ignored as well as the scope. So if you want to undo that, you can just choose to stop ignoring. And now when you go back, you can see that it's still there. Now, even though you ignore alerts on here, we still capture that data and we still generate the alert under the covers. We found that with customer support that a lot of the times a customer may have ignored something that was very important, but is still we're still capturing that data, so if they call Microsoft customer support, the CSS team can still say, hey, there's a really important issue that you chose to ignore. Let me tell you more information about why this is important for your environment. Also in the Manage Alert Rules dialog, if you're curious on what alerts we have in Advisor, you can go to the second tab here, which is the Available Alert Rules. And you can see each of the different categories that we have and the specific rules associated with that. And each rule also links directly to the knowledge base article. So you have an idea of what we're detecting in your environment. This is also very much searchable with the same instant search that we had in the alerts pane. So it's very easy to navigate with all this. Now, a lot of customers also want to have this data outside of Advisor. So a couple things that you can do is you can hit Control-A and then Control-C, which will select all the alerts, and then you'll be able to paste that right into Notepad or into Excel or into a report that you guys make. This is also very useful for the config snapshot if you want to get all the properties about a server. Or once you have a lot of servers that are put in here, you can look at changes across all of your servers at once. So if we had multiple servers that had that same SPN issue, you'd be able to put an account, and it would just filter down to the account property across all your servers. So you can see if a bunch of servers had changes over time. OK, so those are a handful of the changes that we have made to Advisor. Are there any other questions about the functionality or any demos that I could do for you? Question? So the question is, do we use any type of config manager server? Oh, so the question is, do we plan on having config manager as a workload that we support similar to SQL Server or Exchange? That's currently we are looking at areas that have top supportability issues, and config manager is lower on that list than, let's say, Link server, for example.
So when you call Premier Support, do you have to add them to your account, or will they already know about your advisor?
Good question. So the question is let's say you call Premier Support. Will they already know what your advisor account is? No, they won't, because we don't validate any of the data that's sent to us. You can use a fake first name, fake last name, fake company name. You can pretend you're another company. So there's no way that we can actually validate this. So the way that it works is that when you do call up support, what we have is we have a couple things. One, there's an account ID that is generated for you. So you can go to to this panel here and provide them this account ID, and they can look up some data in the back end. Another way to do it is if you can add them as a user, and then they can look at your account. A third way is that there's something called SDP manifest, so that when you first call up Microsoft customer support and they have these ad hoc collections that collect data from your server. Each one of your servers also has a series of registry keys that identify who the customer is, what the gateway is, and what the agent is. So it tries to find if these already exist, and then it pulls it into our back-end system and tries to do a fuzzy lookup on that data. So we try and minimize the amount of things that you need to give us. Like you could imagine, giving a GUID letter by letter would be difficult unless you're emailing or IMing with us. So we do have some advanced ways to do it. But aside from this, there's no way for us to actually say who it is in the real world with the data that we have in the back end, and we want to keep it that way. All right, any other questions or any other demos I could do for you guys? Yes, right here.
These alerts and features are hugely useful. Why aren't they part of the management pack for system operation?
Okay, so the first was a comment saying that these are hugely useful. Thank you for that. And the follow-up question was, why aren't these in the management packs for operations managers? Is that what you're saying? So we'll get into that, but the answer to that is that there are future better together scenarios. We made a bet on using the same underlying technology, and it's just a matter of time before we can figure out a way to do a better integration than what we have today. Yes?
Moving data up and down the cloud, storing it in the cloud, is there any charges for that?
So the question is sending data up to the cloud or downloading from the cloud, are there any charges to that? Yes, it costs Microsoft money for the bandwidth that we use and all the Azure instances that we have and all the high availability stuff, but we don't put that burden on you guys. So whatever your bandwidth costs are to upload that data from your internet service provider, that's the only marginal cost or variable cost in this solution. So if you put up 5,000 servers or one server, there's no additional cost to you. Ideally, you're going to be having software assurance, so you're paying Microsoft, and we're getting some portion of that software assurance allocated to our team. All right, great question. Oh, one more.
Yeah, so just to reinforce the question about SCOM, right now in SCOM for Exchange, there's the best practice analyzer. Is that going away? Do you want us to leverage Advisor?
So the question is how does Advisor relate to things like the best practices analyzer for Exchange? That's a really good question. So the way that we see Advisor is that it's a cross-server product that has very seamless deployment and automatic updates. Things like the BPAs for different products generally go a little bit deeper, and they're run in an ad hoc way. We know that there are some benefits where recently there have been management packs that like automatically run these things under the covers, but Advisor is also more of an early detection mechanism where when we have all this data from customers' environments, we can better identify the patterns so we can see what's the probability that a lot of customers are going to hit each one of these issues. And there's no additional activity that you need to do to get benefit out of that. So we use that to actually then feed into the other things like BPAs, which may only be updated every 3 months or 6 months or 12 months. And we can do it every single month. So personally, I see Advisor as that leading edge where we look at the very top supportability issues across all these server products in a single view for customers that want to have a completely on-premise solution and they're willing to wait the additional 6 months or 12 months for that knowledge to feed into those BPAs, then they're welcome to do so. All right, I'm going to switch back to the slides. We'll still have some additional time for more questions near the end. So top question is, how is Advisor different than Operations Manager? We heard that today, so let me just reiterate these. Advisor is not a real-time monitoring solution. We upload data every day. We try and prevent problems in your environment that other customers similar to you have had. And we currently use the 2007 R2 agent and management pack technology. We don't require that you have Operations Manager, but obviously in this audience, most of you are going to have Operations Manager, and we can work perfectly side by side with it. And we now can work side by side with Operations Manager 2012. If you currently have 2007 R2 and you plan on upgrading to 2012, we will automatically work with the upgrade. We've tested all these scenarios. There have been some MVPs that have helped us test this in real-world environments, and we really thank them for their efforts. And we think this works flawlessly at this point. We do have completely unlimited support if you're having any deployment issues with Advisor. So if you do see some weird edge case where you have a certain version of OM or you don't have OM and you can't deploy Advisor, there is a link for getting help and support, and we'll get you right to our support team that will be able to diagnose that for you guys. And reusing this technology will enable future better together scenarios. We don't have them enabled today, but we would love to be able to get this data to go back from the cloud and pulled into something like Operations Manager or Service Manager so that you can manage this workflow. Unfortunately, we don't have this at this moment. And then ideally, this will also minimize the duplication of data so that you're not capturing data twice and sending it all these different places. All right, so another top question is, wouldn't having both Advisor and Operations Manager be too much overhead for my server? The Advisor data that we collect is very minimal. We do recommend that you deploy this to a test server in your environment and monitor the effect, as any change to a server environment is potentially destabilizing. But in the data that we've captured, the average CPU is less than 1% change. And there are occasional spikes as every 4 to 8 hours we capture data about your different server workloads. The incremental change to agent memory is about 75 megabytes a day or less, and the upload from the gateway to the cloud is 150 kilobytes per server per day, so it's incredibly low overhead. But again, check this out in your environment. We do capture server management data. We are looking at diagnostic data right now, so configuration settings and error logs. Eventually, we may look into things like the utilization or workload throughput, but that data can get very large very fast, and we want to have the smallest payload of data leaving your environment. So we're not actively pursuing those until we can figure out how to technically make that easier. But we definitely do not want to have any customer data or custom workload data. We don't want to capture files from your SharePoint. We don't want to look at emails from Exchange. We don't want to look at user tables from SQL Server. We're only capturing the metadata and management data about your server so that you can run them more efficiently and prevent downtime. All right, so another question that we heard is, isn't sending data outside of my environment bad? So we basically want to be as transparent as possible about the data that we collect, and we want to build trust in the community that we're doing the right things with the data that we do collect. So we have a complete privacy statement that's available, which describes the type of data that we collect and what we can do with that data. Advisor only has visibility into the servers that have agents deployed on them. So if you have 100 servers in your environment and you only deploy Advisor to 5 of them, we only think that you have 5 servers and we don't know anything about the other 95 servers. So we do capture some data from Active Directory about those servers, but we try and minimize any cross-server calls. The uploads, as I showed you, are archived on-premise for 5 days by default to give you a complete audit trail so you know exactly what data has left your environment. And the upload time is configurable, and you can stop uploading at any time. I think there's actually 4 ways that you can prevent uploads from leaving your environment should you ever want to stop. You can uninstall the agent, you can uninstall the gateway, you can deploy a registry key, which basically overrides all settings saying stop uploading from my environment. You can also go into the servers page in your account, and you can choose to remove a gateway. And then anytime that gateway tries to send data to Microsoft, it's like, hey, you are an unauthenticated gateway. We no longer have you associated with an account, and we actively refuse packages from that gateway. And you can also close your account, which effectively does the same thing, but it completely invalidates your certificate and prevents all uploads from all gateways that have ever registered with that certificate. So if there ever is like a big red button you need to hit, we give you all sorts of options to make it very easy for you. You can also close your account at any time, and we will clean up any data that you've ever sent to us within a 90-day window. And your organization will be the only non-Microsoft party who will have access to your individual organization's data. So basically, our team, the Advisor team, for a data mining, basically we do a lot of analysis on this. We do aggregate information across multiple customers. We only look into individual customers' data as there are problems or oddities, but we don't try and validate this data in any way. We don't try and identify who customers are, and even customer support can't do this without your explicit consent and being able to capture data from your environment or you providing us the GUIDs about your environment. We are not going to give this to any marketing or sales people or anybody that may be doing like true-ups for licenses. We don't want to use this data for that effect. Now, you guys may find it useful to have an inventory of all your servers, so you're welcome to deploy Advisor to all your servers and then share that with somebody who you're talking with to do a licensing true-up. But we are not going to proactively be providing this information to any of our sales team. Are there any questions about data privacy or handling sensitive data? We also have an Excel spreadsheet that we periodically update that identifies all the configuration settings that we capture. But the easiest way to see it is just deploy it onto a test server and then either look at the model.xml file or look at the configuration snapshot page so you can see the type of data that we capture. Yes? So the question is what types of companies do I think, with the experience that we've had with Advisor, that may have compliance problems with sending data out of their environment? So I originally thought it was going to be 3. Finance, government, and healthcare. But we have an MVP that is in healthcare, and he actually has no problem sending us data, and he said that this is completely within his compliance. Finance and government generally have, from what we've heard, additional compliance regulations, and I don't know if that's true or if they just didn't want to do the due diligence like our MVP in healthcare. So I would recommend that you guys understand what type of data we're capturing and sending out of the environment and understand whether or not there's any additional compliance or regulations in your industry. Any other questions on handling sensitive data, data privacy? What's that? The question is, what is the encryption? So we communicate over SSL, so we basically sign the package and transmit it securely. And then in Azure, we decrypt it and store it in a highly secured database. So I don't, aside from that, I can't tell you any additional details. Does that answer the question, though? Okay, so how about we chat afterward, and I'll get your info, and I'll get my dev team to give you the exact info that you need. Another question? All right. So in closing, why should you guys try Advisor? Well, the value is that you can prevent problems in your environment that customers similar to you have already experienced. And we're enabling new scenarios where you can easily provision others to see information about your environment without actually giving them access to your individual servers. So this is where you can add additional live IDs for consultants or TAMs or third-party support vendors. And the cost is 0. If you have software assurance, you get this at no additional cost. And if you don't have software assurance, you can sign up for a 60-day free trial. And the amount of effort that you need to put in there is it only takes 5 minutes to get started to try this out. So between the value, the cost, and the effort, I think that this is something that you guys should be able to try out pretty easily. There's a bunch of sites where you can learn more. The easiest is just go to systemcenteradvisor.com and go through the wizard and try it out for yourself. The initial demo that I did is pre-recorded here as a 3-minute demo, so if you want to send that to other people in your company, you can send them that. You can probably just search for System Center Advisor demo. Or you can just tweet at me at Paul Mest or hashtag SCAdvisor. I look at this throughout the day, so if you want to have links to any of this stuff, just tweet at me and I'll post it on my website. And then there's also, we've been working very closely with the SQL team for quite some time. If any of you are SQL DBAs, or if you want to see some of the new things that are happening with the management packs for SQL Server 2012 or SQL Azure, there's another session, which is AMB314. That's happening Thursday morning at 8:30. I think right here in this room or right around here. Okay, so I'd like to remind you guys to complete your session evaluation. I read all the comments, so if you can just write just a few comments about what you either liked or didn't like or what we can improve, either about the talk or the product. I love sharing that with the team. And there are additional resources at MMS-2012, and I think this will be available on demand to you guys. And now I'd like to open it up for questions. We have about 6 minutes. Yes, question right here.
Is the Advisor Gateway Server compatible with the original Gateway Server?
So, yeah, so the question is can the Advisor Gateway Server coexist with the Operations Manager Gateway Server? Yeah, they're two completely different code bases. There's nothing shared between them, so it should be able to work side by side just fine. Any more questions? Yes, right here.
Why not do automatic fixing with orchestrator?
So the question is, why isn't there automatic fixing with Orchestrator? Yeah, so there's a philosophical debate about how you can automatically change things in your environment. We would absolutely love to have something like Orchestrator. This is what we lump under the future better together scenarios. From what we've seen is more customers have been afraid of there being instructions pulled down from the internet and then executed automatically in their servers. Some people would like kind of like a fix now button where there can be still some type of flow control. But what we really want is we want to get this into something like the operations manager or the system center suite, where you can have complete control between having the single pane of glass and something like OM, have service manager where you can manage the flow, and then once that is done, then we can have like an orchestration like fix now scenario where you flag it in one of those tools and it will happen. Unfortunately, we don't have that today, but we would absolutely love that scenario. So the question was, so the scenario is, are there any challenges with using this as a merger and acquisition tool where you want to have a company you're considering acquiring give you information about their environment? I mean, if they deploy this and they provision you access to their environment through adding your live ID, I don't see there being any problems there. I've never heard that use case. I'll use that in the future. Any other questions? Yeah, right here.
So how much disk space does it need? Does it store a lot of data on there?
So the question is, how much disk space does it need? When you deploy the agent, I think it's probably like 20, 25 megabytes of disk space, very small. The data that it collects is probably in the 2 to 3 megabyte range, and then it cabs it up. So if you're storing 5 days of that, you're looking at another megabyte. So we're looking at like easily under 100 megabytes per server. If you have a lot of servers sending data through a single gateway, there are a number of advanced settings that we have where we only store 1 gigabyte of data by default. And once you either hit the 5-day threshold or the 1 gigabyte limit, we'll start cleaning up the oldest things. And those are also thresholds that you can customize. Any additional questions? All right, I'll stick around if you want to just talk to me one-on-one or have any deeper issues. But thanks a lot.